In the early hours of dawn on January 24, 1915, through the smoke and mist of the North Sea, a massive gray shape emerged from the darkness. The German battlecruiser SMS Seydlitz, her steel hull scarred by battle but still cutting through the waves at 26 knots, was about to earn a reputation that would make her legendary among naval historians. This was the ship that would not die, a vessel so resilient that she would survive near catastrophic damage, not once, not twice, but repeatedly throughout World War II, defying every attempt by enemy shells, torpedoes, mines, and even her own crew to send her to the bottom. The story of Seydlitz begins in the shipyards of Hamburg, where her keel was laid down in 1910 as the German Navy's fourth battlecruiser design. When she slid down the ways on March 30, 1912, she represented the pinnacle of first-generation German battlecruiser engineering. At 658 feet in overall length and displacing 24,988 metric tons at normal load, Seydlitz was substantially larger than her predecessors, the Von der Tann and Moltke-class vessels. Her designers had learned from earlier ships and incorporated improvements that would prove crucial in the battles ahead. The ship's armament reflected German naval philosophy of balanced offense and defense. 10 11-inch guns, mounted in 5 twin turrets, provided her main firepower, with the unique arrangement allowing cross-deck firing that maximized her broadside potential. The turrets were designated Anton, Bertha, Caesar, Dora, and Emil. Following German naval tradition, these massive weapons could hurl 460-pound shells at targets over 16 miles away, and during her combat career, she would fire 376 main battery shells at enemy vessels. Her secondary battery consisted of 12 5.9-inch quick-firing guns mounted in casemates along her sides, while lighter weapons including 88mm guns and torpedo tubes rounded out her offensive capabilities. What truly set Seydlitz apart was her protection scheme. German battlecruiser designers prioritized armor over pure speed, and Seydlitz embodied this philosophy with belt armor up to 12 inches thick, protecting her vital areas. Her hull was divided into 17 watertight compartments, with a double bottom extending for 76% of her length. This compartmentalization would prove to be her salvation time and again, as battle damage flooded multiple sections without sinking the ship. The engineering plant that drove Seydlitz consisted of 27 boilers feeding 4 steam turbines that produced 63,000 shaft horsepower, giving her a design speed of 26.5 knots. During her trials, forced draft pushed her engines to produce even more power, allowing her to exceed her design specifications. Her crew of 43 officers and 1,025 men would need every ounce of this power in the battles to come. On May 22, 1913, Seydlitz was commissioned into the Imperial German Navy and assigned as flagship of the 1st Scouting Group. Her first commanding officer took aboard sailors transferred from the recently retired armored cruiser, York, experienced men who would form the core of her wartime crew. As tensions mounted across Europe in the summer of 1914, Seydlitz lay at anchor in Wilhelmshaven roads when the mobilization order arrived on August 1, 1914. The ship's baptism of fire came on August 28, 1914, during the Battle of Heligoland Bight. When wireless reports arrived of British forces penetrating German waters, Seydlitz rushed to sea at 20 knots, despite having only one engine available due to condenser maintenance. By the time she reached the battle area, the engagement was over, but this would be the first of many times the ship would race toward the sound of gunfire. Her first taste of enemy fire came on November 3, 1914, during the bombardment of Great Yarmouth. As dawn broke over the English coast, Seydlitz opened fire on the torpedo gunboat Halcyon at a range of 98 to 120 hectometers, with her medium-caliber artillery. 3 minutes later, her heavy guns joined in, pounding both the British vessel and the coastal town. The British return fire was ineffective, and Seydlitz withdrew unscathed. But this was merely the prelude to far more serious encounters. The bombardment of Hartlepool on December 16, 1914, provided the first real test of Seydlitz's armor protection. During the attack on this English port town, coastal batteries managed to score hits on the German battlecruiser, but the shells caused only minimal damage. The thick steel plates that protected her vital areas shrugged off the enemy fire, giving her crew confidence in their ship's defensive capabilities. But it was at the Battle of Dogger Bank on January 24, 1915, that Seydlitz truly earned her reputation as the ship that would not die. Leading the German line as flagship of Admiral Hipper's first scouting group, she engaged the British battlecruisers in a running-gun battle across the North Sea. At 10:25 that morning, HMS Lion's 13.5-inch guns found their target, striking Seydlitz in the forecastle with minimal effect. But 15 minutes later, Lion scored a hit that nearly destroyed the German ship. The British shell penetrated the rear barbette of Seydlitz's aft turrets, and while the projectile itself failed to enter the barbette completely, the explosion flashed into the working chamber and detonated the propellant charges inside. The resulting inferno was described by survivors as flames rising as high as a house above the turrets. Fire raced through the reloading chamber, up into both rear turrets, and down into the ammunition chambers, where it spread through connecting doors that desperate men had opened while trying to escape. In the ammunition chambers, temperatures reached deadly levels as cordite charges ignited in sequence. The entire gun crews of both rear turrets perished in moments, 159 men killed by the flash fire. Flames roared through ventilation systems and threatened to reach the main shell magazines, which would have detonated with enough force to obliterate the entire ship. In this moment of supreme crisis, the executive officer made a decision that saved not only Seydlitz, but potentially changed the course of naval warfare. Recognizing that the ship was seconds from complete destruction, the executive officer ordered both magazines flooded immediately. The Pumpenmeister Wilhelm Heidkamp, displaying extraordinary courage, turned the red-hot valves to flood the magazines despite severe injury from the superheated metal. This quick action prevented the fire from reaching the main ammunition stores, but the damage was catastrophic. Both rear turrets were destroyed, their armored structures twisted and blackened by the intense heat. Even as fires raged through her aft sections, Seydlitz fought back. At 11:01, her surviving guns scored a hit on Lyon with a single 11-inch shell, knocking out 2 of the British battlecruiser's engines. This demonstrated the ship's remarkable fighting spirit, maintaining offensive capability, even while suffering potentially mortal damage. At 11:25, a third British shell struck her armored belt amidships, but by then, the worst was over. The Dogger Bank action forced German naval architects to reconsider battlecruiser design. The flash fire that nearly destroyed Seydlitz revealed dangerous vulnerabilities in ammunition handling procedures. Anti-flash precautions were hastily installed throughout the high seas fleet, modifications that would prove crucial in future battles. Seydlitz herself underwent 3 months of repairs, emerging with improved safety systems that would be tested sooner than anyone expected. On April 24, 1916, Seydlitz sailed as flagship for another raid on the English coast, this time targeting Yarmouth and Lowestoft. Admiral Hipper was on sick leave, so Rear Admiral Friedrich Boedicker flew his flag in Seydlitz. The operation began smoothly, with 5 German battlecruisers and their escorts heading north through familiar waters. But at 15:38, disaster struck in an unexpected form. A British mine, laid weeks earlier in the German bight approaches, tore a 50-foot hole in Seydlitz's starboard hull just aft of the torpedo tube. 11 men died instantly as 1,400 tons of seawater flooded into the ship. The explosion lifted her bow by 4.6 feet as water rushed into compartments that had been designed to keep her afloat. Once again, The ship's compartmentalization saved her from immediate sinking, but she was forced to withdraw at reduced speed while her consorts continued the mission. The mine damage required over a month of repairs, but by late May 1916, Seydlitz was ready for what would become her most famous battle. The Battle of Jutland on May 31st and June 1st, 1916, would test every improvement made after Dogger Bank and push the ship beyond all reasonable limits of survival. As the German High Seas Fleet steamed north toward its fateful encounter with the British Grand Fleet, Seydlitz took her position in the van as part of the first scouting group. When Admiral Beatty's battlecruisers appeared on the horizon at 1548, the long-awaited decisive battle began. Within minutes, both fleets were engaged in a deadly artillery duel at ranges exceeding 20,000 yards. At 16:55, Seydlitz received her first hit in compartment 13 to starboard forward. The electrical switch room was knocked out, but the ship continued fighting. 2 minutes later, disaster struck again when a British shell penetrated Caesar turret's barbette, igniting propellant charges in the working chamber. The improvements made after Dogger Bank proved their worth, as new anti-flash precautions prevented the catastrophic spread of fire that had nearly destroyed the ship 15 months earlier. As the battle continued, Seydlitz engaged multiple British battlecruisers simultaneously. At 17:15, she witnessed the spectacular destruction of HMS Indefatigable as the British ship exploded in a pillar of flame. 11 minutes later, she helped concentrate fire on HMS Queen Mary, contributing to that ship's destruction when the British battlecruiser detonated in a mushroom cloud of smoke and debris 600 to 800 meters high. These victories came at a terrible cost, as British shells continued to pound the German line. At 17:57, a British torpedo struck Seydlitz in compartment 13 on her starboard side, the same area damaged by the mine weeks earlier. The torpedo bulkhead held firm, a testament to German engineering, but the cumulative damage was mounting. From 1806 to 1810, 3 more heavy shells found their target, 2 striking the forecastle and 1 hitting the face of the Bertha turret so hard that the right gun was disabled. Throughout the night action that followed, Seydlitz continued to suffer hits while threading her way through the British fleet. At 21:28, she was struck on the roof of Dora turret and on the Admiral's bridge. The turret hit caused relatively little damage, but the bridge hit killed several staff officers and wounded others. Despite this, the ship maintained her position in the line and continued fighting. The most dangerous moment came near dawn on June 1st as Seydlitz attempted to escape through the British fleet. At 00:45, she was sighted by HMS Agincourt, which noted her as a ship or destroyer. In a moment that changed history, Agincourt's captain chose not to engage, fearing to reveal his position. This decision allowed Seydlitz to slip through the British lines and head for the safety of Horn's Reef. But the ship's ordeal was far from over. By 0340, she scraped over Horn's Reef with her speed reduced to 7 knots. Both gyro compasses had failed, leaving her navigation dependent on the light cruiser Pillau. By 15:30 on June 1st, Seydlitz was in critical condition. Her bow was nearly completely submerged, kept afloat only by the buoyancy remaining in the broadside torpedo room. The ship had to be turned around and steamed stern first to relieve pressure on the failing bulkheads. Preparations were made to evacuate the wounded crew when salvation arrived in the form of 2 pump steamers. These emergency vessels managed to stabilize the flooding, allowing Seydlitz to limp back to port. She reached the Outer Jade River on the morning of June 2nd and entered Wilhelmshaven's Entrance 3 on June 3rd. At her worst point, she had been flooded with 5,308 tons of seawater, yet she survived. The damage assessment revealed the full extent of Seydlitz's punishment at Jutland. She had been hit 21 times by heavy caliber shells, twice by secondary battery shells, and once by a torpedo. 98 of her crew were killed and 55 wounded. Yet the ship had maintained her fighting capability throughout the engagement. Her guns had fired regularly, and her engines never failed, despite the massive flooding forward. The repairs took months to complete, but by 1917, Seydlitz was back in service. She participated in several more sorties, including attempts to intercept British convoys, though these missions achieved limited success. As the war dragged on and Germany's position became increasingly desperate, the ship's activities were reduced due to fuel shortages and the growing effectiveness of the British naval blockade. The German naval mutinies of November 1918 marked the end of Seydlitz's fighting career. When the armistice was signed, she was among the ships interned at Scapa Flow in the Orkney Islands. For months, she sat at anchor in the cold Scottish waters, while negotiations continued over the fate of the German fleet. The ship that had survived so much in battle was about to face her final challenge. On June 21, 1919, Rear Admiral Ludwig von Reuter made the decision that would end Seydlitz's career. With British guards temporarily absent on training exercises, the German fleet executed a coordinated scuttling operation. Throughout Scapa Flow, German warships opened their seacocks and settled toward the bottom. Seydlitz, moored in relatively shallow water, only 70 feet deep, rolled over to her starboard side with her port casemates and No. 3 turret remaining above the surface. But even in death, Seydlitz proved as stubborn as she had been in life. The salvage efforts that began in the 1920s became almost as dramatic as her wartime career. The first attempt to raise her was partially successful, but a storm caused her to sink again, taking salvage equipment down with her. A second attempt also ended in failure, when she was accidentally sunk again on the orders of the salvage company's owner. Finally, in 1929, Seydlitz was raised for the third and final time. Cameras recorded the dramatic moment as the battle-scarred hull broke the surface of Scapa Flow, water cascading from her damaged superstructure. She was towed away and broken up for scrap in 1930, 11 years after the war's end and nearly 17 years after her launch. Even her destruction proved the ship's resilience, as salvage crews found her hull and machinery in remarkably good condition despite years underwater. Note: the legacy of SMS Seydlitz extends far beyond her individual service record. The flash fire at Dogger Bank led directly to improved ammunition handling procedures throughout the German Navy, modifications that prevented similar disasters at Jutland. Her survival of massive battle damage demonstrated the effectiveness of German compartmentalization and damage control techniques. Most importantly, her story became a symbol of the resilience and determination that characterized the Imperial German Navy during World War II. Naval historians continued to study Seydlitz as an example of how good design and brave crews could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Her ability to survive hits from 13.5-inch guns, underwater explosions, torpedo strikes, and massive flooding while maintaining fighting capability made her legendary among warships of any era. The fact that she required 3 separate attempts at salvage only added to her mystique as the ship that would not die. In the broader context of naval warfare, Seydlitz represented the pinnacle of first-generation battlecruiser design. Her balanced approach to armor, armament, and speed influenced subsequent German naval construction, while her battle experience provided invaluable lessons for future warship designers. The improvements made after Dogger Bank and before Jutland showed how combat experience could be rapidly incorporated into existing designs, a flexibility that served the German Navy well throughout the war. The men who served aboard Seydlitz during her combat career displayed extraordinary courage and professionalism under the most extreme conditions, from Pumpenmeister Wilhelm Heidkamp, who risked his life to flood the magazines at Dogger Bank, to the damage control parties who kept her afloat after Jutland. The crew's dedication matched their ship's resilience. Their actions under fire demonstrated the high training standards and fighting spirit that characterized the Imperial German Navy. Today, SMS Seydlitz is remembered as one of the most famous warships of World War II, a vessel whose name became synonymous with survival against overwhelming odds. Her story encompasses the major naval battles of the war, the evolution of battlecruiser design, and the human drama of men fighting for their lives in steel ships on hostile seas. From her launch in Hamburg to her final destruction in Scottish waters, she embodied the technological achievement and martial spirit of an empire that would not survive the war she helped fight. The ship that would not die had finally met her end, but her legend lives on in the annals of naval history as a testament to both German engineering and the indomitable will to survive.